welcome back to our anime show. I am a Green Queen.
And I'm Binge Monster.
Team, we have such an exciting episode for you today. So we had the great honor of, meeting this person at Anime NYC back in August. Justin Leach, the CEO, founder, and executive producer of Qubic Pictures. And at that panel, you were also with Jarrett Martin, sort of talking about him talking about animation, you talking about production, producing, and so forth. You've worked on some really, really incredible projects. To note, Eden, which came out in like 2021. You can stream that on Netflix. Star Wars Visions with Lucasfilm, of course, streaming on Disney Plus. And I hope we get to talk about this a little bit more, but you do have an upcoming project, Leviathan, that's going to come out in 2025. That's going to be on Netflix. The trailer's out, so be sure to go check that out. And it's based off a novel as well by Scott Westerfeld. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
So I just wanted to, first just jump in and ask you, like, what does it mean to be a producer of anime at a studio like Qubic Pictures?
Yeah, producing is an interesting title that has many roles and responsibilities, and it can be different for, depending on the production, that role could be different. But in my particular case, the type of producing that I do is basically, someone will come to me like Netflix or Disney, or I'll be talking with someone like that, and they'll be like, we want to make this project, and or I will have a pitch of a project that I would like to make. And so I have to figure out, as a producer, I have to figure out, okay, who's going to be the director, who's the talent that we want to involve, who's going to be the writer, who's going to be the studio that we're going to work with, how much is it going to cost, when can we deliver it by, and it's this sort of it's a very big puzzle that I have to figure out, and then I got to find the team that can help build it and make sure that everything's being done on time, and just kind of keeping an eye on the big picture, and then also communicating with all of the studios in Japan, the talent in Japan, and then also the studios in Hollywood or whoever that we're working with. So it's a very, I didn't really, until I worked on like Eden, I'd say I didn't really understand how hard producing is until I actually started doing it. But I really had fun, and I really loved doing it. So, but it's not easy. It's really challenging. But yeah, so we sort of have to wear all these different hats, and
Mm.
ultimately our responsibility is to deliver the production to whoever is financing or sponsoring the project.
To ask a question about this, and I was planning on asking later on, but I think it's particularly relevant given what you've just said. I know Eden, as you just said, was particularly special in terms of your work to date because you were able to pitch that yourself to Netflix, right? Um,
Yes.
I work in technology, as I told you behind the scenes before we got recorded today, and one of the things that I've become pretty familiar with is the pitching process. Typically in the technology world for startups, this is to like venture capitalists and so forth, and they in their pitch they talk about the team that they're building and the mission and the product that they're building, the value prop and so forth. How does a pitch to a studio like Netflix look different? And what does the value that you're committing to look like as well? And I'm just curious, like, how does that work?
It's kind of similar, actually, not too dissimilar from pitching to a VC, but it's more you sort of need a story. I mean, other than there's just like a narrative story that you're trying to sell. There's a story
Hmm.
with you're building this world with characters, and is that particular genre or thing that you're pitching kind of popular right now, or is that something that they're looking for? And in the case of Netflix, for the Eden pitch, for example, that was a story that I developed originally when I worked at Blue Sky Studios way back in, like, I think I originally started in 1998. It was being developed as a feature film at Blue Sky Studios, and Fox was very briefly developing it at the time. And they didn't end up making the movie because at the time there was like no one was making adult animation in America like that. So I it just wasn't the right time, and so yeah, so later through my career working at studios, I somehow managed to get the rights back from Fox, and then 10 years later, it took about 20 years for this whole process to happen. And then one of my former coworkers at Production IG had become a producer at Netflix in Netflix Japan, and I had been working on a short film for a while and I was just sharing him some of my work, and then he sort of invited me to pitch. So in that case, Netflix asked me to pitch an idea, and so I gave several ideas that I was developing, and the one that they liked was the Eden story, and so we used that as our primary pitch. And then I worked with him back and forth on the pitch. Here's my pitch deck. Okay, and then I had to like figure out, like I had like 3 months to basically build the team, and I was working at a mobile game company at the time called MZ Games, and and so I was like, okay, how am I gonna do this? And so I was living in Burlingame in the Bay Area at the time, and so yeah, I called upon all my friends. So like I had known like Kamoto-san, who's a character designer from Cowboy Bebop, one of the founders of Bones. I was like, can
Mhm.
you please
Wow.
help me? And he's like, okay, sure. And so I basically like cashed in all of my like friend tokens, that I met over the years that I could just, hey, could you do me a favor? And I managed to cobble together through those relationships that I built over many years a team that appealed enough to Netflix where they were willing to take a chance on it. And so it wasn't, yeah. So it was trial by fire. I hadn't done too much like budgeting or legal stuff, and I was very lucky to have like a good lawyer advise me on,
Mm,
type of the business side of things. So I learned
yeah.
so much through on Eden. I mean, yeah, it was really very transformative, and yeah, so like I guess in that particular case, I was invited to pitch, and then yeah, it was about packaging an idea, packaging a team, and making it appealing enough to sell it to Netflix. That also, they also, by the way, I forgot to mention, but there are different types of deals that you can do with a streamer. So you can do like a
Mm.
license type of a deal where you retain the rights, but
Hmm.
you sell a per episode fee, and so you can do whatever you want with the
Oh,
IP, like you can make toys or books or whatever. But in my
right.
case, because I was really starting from scratch, they bought the entire rights to the show, so they own the idea completely, but in
Mm,
exchange for that, I was able to fully finance the production without having to worry about how to get the financing for it. So that's also another thing that was a bit
interesting.
different. So it was actually one of the first owned originals that Netflix did early on for anime.
I was gonna say it came out around a
Wow.
time where it seemed like Netflix was still experimenting with anime.
Yeah, they were just getting started. Yeah.
Very
And I just feel
cool.
like and I hate to say it, but like, at the time it was almost like I don't want to say like anyone could have pitched an idea, but like they were they were like the opportunities were very open. Like people would
Sure.
take risks that they would not take now, like because I hadn't done too much like on that level before. So I feel very lucky that I was able to do that project.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Even in hearing you speak now, it sounds like you were sort of again like kind of like boots on the ground at Netflix at the time when the anime was really moving into that space, and it feels like the same kind of situation when we're talking about like Star Wars Visions and that project. Like from my perspective, that seems like one of the first times that even Disney and Disney Plus was going to be having like anime style projects
Yeah.
on their streaming platform. So like what why do you think that series was so successful? Like what were some of the lessons that you had, takeaways from that project and so forth?
Yeah, I mean that was, I had worked on I'd worked at Lucasfilm before on the Clone Wars
Mhm.
series, and I was there early on, and so I have a long relationship with them, and I I'm I've known Dave Filoni, for example, for many years, and I've always been kind of bugging him, oh please, I want to make a Star Wars anime, please, and even when I first started at the at Lucasfilm, and shortly after he joined. And he was actually one of the few people that actually knew Japan and knew anime and knew like
Mm,
not many not many people know it so well, and so we got along pretty well. And one of the things early on in the Clone Wars is they asked, we I helped arrange this mechanical designer from Ghost in the Shell called Atsushi Takuchi do some mechanical designs for Clone Wars, and then he also directed some stuff. So there's kind of a history at Lucasfilm of that, and so I had reached out to him just wanting to do it, and he reconnected me with the Lucasfilm team. And at the time, they were considering doing an anime project. So again, I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, and they asked me if I'd be interested in helping on Visions, and I was like, of course, it's like, it's my dream. And I love, I love pioneering stuff. I like trying things, new things. I like, but yeah, it's true. Like Visions really opened the doors. It opened Disney's eyes to anime. Like, and after Visions came out, there were more anime on their platform.
Yeah.
And I think yeah, like others. There are other examples like the Harlequin. I think, or like they did like another
Oh,
like
the
Suicide Squad,
isekai?
Isekai,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Hmm.
there were some other. I mean, there had been some examples before Visions, like Matrix is probably a good example. Animatrix is one, and I think there was also Batman Ninja. So we weren't necessarily the first, but definitely I think. And when COVID hit, a lot of new people were watching anime for the first time, and it was like
Hmm.
this perfect combination of things, and then it just happened to land at the right time. And I still think the shorts are great. I still watch them again and again. But yeah, I think it was a great. Yeah, you're right in that the Disney has never really commissioned anime directly like that before,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was really interesting, and I was really happy to see that.
I have to take a quick step back as a Star Wars fan myself. Obviously, I'm an anime fan, but I'm also a Star Wars fan. So I have to ask, Star Wars fans are incredibly picky and very opinionated. They're known to be
Oh
a very
yeah,
negatively opinionated fandom, right? Having said that,
yeah,
though, the Clone Wars in particular is widely loved relative to almost every other Star Wars project out there that's happened since. I mean, I can't even talk about the prequels because so many people are. I don't hate the prequels, but my question to you is, why do you think that the Clone Wars was so successful? I mean, as somebody who was kind of on the ground, right? Or I don't know if you've seen that, but it
yeah.
is a very beloved
Hmm.
series.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think there's several factors that go into that. Um, I remember early on when I was asked I was one of the people that interviewed Dave when he was, for the job for
Mm,
and he was a big fan. He dressed up as Plo Koon and he would go to fan conventions, and I remember the producer asking me, "Are you sure we should hire a fan, like, is that the right thing to do?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I do think you should have someone that understands the fans and where they're coming from." And so I think that's probably a big part of why like Clone Wars was so well received, is I think it was there's definitely a lot of passion in the project. Also, there's George's involvement, and George.
Mm.
It was kind of surreal because I was working at Skywalker Ranch, and just like seeing George Lucas walk by every now and then, it's just like, where am I? How did I end up here? This is crazy. I just feel so lucky. So unbelievably grateful for that whole experience. But George was like, yeah, he would be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make 100 episodes. Yeah, let's. And we were all like, what? Like George is a real visionary, and I always just admired his. Also, not just in terms of the movie making and the storytelling, but like on the technology side, like early, like he was like,
mm,
what was so amazing is he has the resources available to him to be like, let's make an animation software for story artists to make their process easier. And so they spent a whole bunch of money building a tool for storyboard artists that is basically like one of the early like virtual production systems, which is very similar to a lot of the stuff that now ILM is doing with Stagecraft. And at the time, we're kind of pioneering stuff. George kind of saw that. He already knew that was coming. He just has such an amazing sense, and it was so cool to be able to see that. And yeah, and so I think like having George there, Dave there, and having the passion and the team of artists that were assembled, it was extremely hard. The first two seasons, I just worked on the first two seasons, and
mm-hmm,
we were just building from scratch, nothing, and it
mm,
was so hard. I think the first two seasons maybe weren't the most popular, but slowly, I think as people, I know like when Ahsoka first came out, there were some people complaining about her dialogue, like or like some of the writing, but now people look back at it and they're like, actually that was good. That was the right decision. And even the prequels too. I think again, I think George is kind of ahead of his time often, and people can't see it. Even the prequels at the time, I didn't like them very much when they came out, but now when I look back at it today, like actually, I do like those movies. Actually, they're pretty good. Like very
Yeah.
relevant to today, and like how a
Mm,
republic falls. It's very deep, and what we're going through right now in terms of division in our country. So, yeah,
right.
I think, yeah, long-winded answer.
Mhm.
Yeah, as I feel like there was just a great team of people that were passionate about Star Wars, and Dave and George were kind of at the helm, and they kind of they just put they put that into the show.
Mhm.
You spoke about technology, and I want to take a step out a little bit to better understand technology, um, especially the technology that you as a producer use, but also at a high level. I don't think the technology that's used in the production process is common knowledge unless you're an animator. So maybe you could zoom
Mm.
out and give us like a high
Hmm.
level landscape view of technology used in the creation of anime and also in the on the production side as well, right?
Yeah.
On the development
Well,
side.
there's a big difference. Like, yeah, I love that topic, and there's actually a very big difference between North American pipelines and Japanese anime studios. So usually, like in the Western animation studios, they build a lot of custom software, or they just have a higher budget, so they have more tools to work with. Whereas in
Hmm.
Japan, I think there's been a lot. The budgets are much smaller, and the studios are smaller, and they have to learn how to work with what you have. Like they can't afford to hire an R&D engineer or a tools engineer to build tools specific to their needs. So like when you go to a lot of 2D animation studios, there's lots of like very old legacy ways of doing things that you might be surprised to learn. Like a lot of times, like for a traditional 2D animation studio, they have these little envelopes which contain all the drawings, and there's like certain color codes for each of the like a certain paper has a color, and that will signify a particular stage in the production process. And the envelope itself has little stamps on the outside, where as it gets stamps of approval, they just kind of gets stamped and then passed along. And when I was working at IG, I even for my shots, my CG shots that I was creating on Ghost in the Shell 2, they gave me a little paper envelope of drawings and information about the shot, and I had to figure everything out. So Japan is they tend to use things like for scheduling they will use like Google Sheets or Excel is common. Google Drive is very common, but nothing like in terms of the yeah like for storyboarding. Some are using Toon Boom, but I think the predominant yeah, I think like Clip Paint is one that I think most of the animators are using in Japan. But
And
each studio kind of varies. But yeah.
what is that? What are those tools? Toon Boom.
Oh, Clip Paint. Oh, sorry, Toon
What
Boom.
do they
Sorry.
do?
Yeah, Toon Boom is like a tool used for making storyboards,
Okay.
and you can animate. There's an editing timeline, and you can basically make your animatics that way. And animatics is basically an animated storyboard. It's basically the storyboard that's cut in time. So yeah, that's what the Toon Boom does. Toon Boom also has animation software for making 2D animation, but that's not
Mm,
very popular in Japan. But most people are using Clip Paint, I believe, and some are using TV Paint, which is popular in France by French animators.
mm,
But yeah, there's those softwares. That's just for the animation production side. On the 3D side, there's Maya, 3D Studio Max, Lightwave, full 3D programs. There's Blender. Blender has a very big indie anime community right now in Japan. So you can see if you just type in indie anime in Twitter, you'll see a whole bunch of like interesting creators.
mm,
But yeah, those are some of the main tools. But yeah, like for example, Lightwave is a very old 3D software that yeah, I didn't even know it's still around. It's that old, But like for example, Kamikaze Doga, which made the Duel, which is the first short of Star Wars Visions, they use Lightwave, to make that animation. And it just like blows me away. How did they use Lightwave
mm,
to make that? So sometimes like studios are just like they have their way, and it doesn't change so much, but they just keep refining and just getting better at using that tool. But yeah, like it's not so, yeah, like the main tools are Excel and sort of the off-the-shelf type of things. And then lately I've been using Notion. I'm a big fan of Notion, if you've used that at
Yes.
all.
Yeah.
But like
We love Notion.
basically making our entire pipeline, our whole company is like all around Notion. There's another software called well, now it's called Flow, but it used to be called Shotgun, then ShotGrid, and it's basically just it's just it's like a production tracking software that's industry standard. But
Hmm.
I feel like, yeah, I can do everything with Notion now. It's just like, so it's crazy all you can do with the Notion. So that's probably one of the more newer ones that some people are using is Notion.
I love that you just said
Interesting.
that you use Notion. Love that.
Oh man, I'm a total data nerd, like pipeline, like problem solving, and like how do you get 500 people working together on the same thing? Like that's all very yeah, I love that stuff. Yeah.
I just in our conversation of the different technology that is used, in Japan, here, and so forth, and given, some of the projects that you've worked on where you're working with, artists here, you're working with artists over there, production companies, and so forth, like, can you talk about literally to how you do sorts of collaboration like that? Like, how are you bringing all of these people together? How is that facilitated, especially when they're working like on the same kind of project and the same vision, for lack of a better term, but you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, like definitely Visions is a logistical nightmare because it's basically like, let's say there's 8 episodes and each production is happening completely independent of one another, sometimes all at the same time. So like it's like I always jokingly say it's like making a television series where you're making each episode at the same time. And so we have to figure out like, okay, we built actually a tracking system we used Smart Sheets, although we'll probably just move it to Notion. But for now, actually now we are using Notion for it. But basically we basically have like these meeting logs or translation logs. So like for a company, like let's say let's say Science Saru, for example, we have a producer meeting where let's say we had a regular meeting on the books. We have a meeting log we track in one place, so we can always go back and refer to the same meeting notes because there's just so much going on. It helps us to organize it. And then for email, we have a translations like tracker where we have, okay, so we've got an email that we need to send to Science Saru. We need to translate it into Japanese, and so we use like a status to send updates to our translators, and then they get a notification, and then they go into the Google Doc, make the translation into Japanese, and then once that's finished, if it's me sending the email, I'll open up the doc, copy and paste it into the email, and then send it to the person. So all of our emails always have both Japanese and English, and then
Mm.
anything coming in, we have to, because my Japanese isn't super strong and as it should be, but also we're dealing with like clients like Lucasfilm, and we have to tell them, we have to translate the information for them. So for Lucas, so that's one of the things we do at Qubic for some, it's like just help make that communication process seamless so they don't even have to think about it. Because typically it's always like for someone just to go in without having that, it's really hard, I think, to be successful in Japan. So we kind of help make that smooth. So yeah, we use all like tracking. We use like Smartsheet to track stuff. We also use Smartsheet for scheduling because they have really good Gantt charts. Although again, trying to move everything to Notion, like I have this dream of like everything under one roof. But yeah, that's kind of what we're using right now. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, is that basically the same thing when you're trying to work on the same anime title, and maybe there are 2 or 3 different studios that are subcontracted under a larger studio for a portion of the work? Like, how do you ensure everything is aligned there?
Yeah, so we just usually it's much easier when it's just one studio. Typically we try to work with one studio. But that studio itself may outsource to other studios. That's very normal in Japan too, by the way. If you look in the
Yeah.
credits of most big titles, you'll see all the other studios' names. They usually help each other get projects done. So so that's like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the the environment I think that they typically work in, is trying to help each other. But yeah, I'm not
Mm.
sure if that answers your question or not.
Oh, I mean, I think the question was largely answered by your previous answer, right? It was really
Okay.
just to better understand, how
Yeah.
like how do you ensure that all these different groups of people are working cohesively together around
Yeah.
aligned vision, right? And timeline too,
Yeah.
right?
And that's kind of the more the producing part, or it's also called seisaku staff, which are in charge of managing all the artists. So usually what we'll do is have like a weekly meeting, like for Leviathan, for example, we have a weekly meeting with Orange, and we always go through, okay, where are we on the schedule, and if this is going to be late, and and then we try to navigate any problems that come up. What this unexpected cost happened? How do we pay for it? Because also, when we have a production, we have a fixed cost. Like we can't just
Mm,
say, "Hey, Netflix, can we have some more money for this?" And as a producer, our job is to figure out how to deliver that show for the money that was given to you. And it's very hard unless they come to you and say, "Oh, we want to redo this." They'll pay for it. But yeah, I can't just ask for more money arbitrarily. So it's very hard. It's very, very hard. Yeah, and also another challenging part about working with Japan, and from a producerial perspective, is that there is an auteur system. The director usually has the final say. In Hollywood, the producers often will give notes, and the directors have to answer to those notes because they're usually the ones paying the money. Like
mm-hmm,
the risk and the control are usually lined up in Hollywood, whereas in Japan, the investors or sponsors don't have the ability really to change it all that much. And the directors are usually the one, especially the better director, the more famous directors. You just kind of have to support them the best you can, and just try to work through things together the best as possible. So yeah, that's one of the challenges of working in Japan, is like but I think on the flip side, that is what makes anime so unique and authentic, and they have been successful this way, like working this way for many years. So there's something to be said about that. And I think I also, when working with Japan, I try to respect the way that Japan works. And so I don't try to like change their system, but just respect the way that they're used to, and then just try to work within that as best as possible. But yeah, it's very
absolutely.
different. That's why Hollywood and Japan often projects don't work out so well, because of those big cultural differences, and they're just so different. It's a two very different worlds. So sometimes it's hard to get both. But luckily, for example, Lucasfilm was really great. They were super supportive and very open to how Japan worked, and not like most other Hollywood companies I've worked with before. It's not always like that. So I felt very lucky that Lucasfilm was really receptive to how, they're just very open and accepting of Japan.
As you're speaking, I keep thinking of the quote that you had brought up at the panel too, like the relationship between East and West, and
Hmm.
the coming together. And even just hearing from you, like I can tell that some of these values and some of these things, while sometimes can be like a bit of maybe a headache, they stay tried and true in your work. So
Mm.
kudos to you, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, definitely. Like it's hard sometimes to get both sides to align on things, and yeah, my dream really is to work with creators in Japan side by side as equals, and just working together, making great stuff, which is like kind of what I'm used to working in America, at American animation studios. Like it's just people from around the world that are the best at what they do coming together to make something. And I think you get cool stuff out of that. But yeah, like it's hard both sides. It's really hard on both sides sometimes.
Hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm very driven, and it's kind of really close to my heart. So I'd never, yeah, that's my dream that that's kept me on my path for so many years.
And I just wanted to jump in again because as we're sort of talking about, your passions, while we were at the panel, you started talking about, some 90s anime that you love, and you started mentioning some of your favorites. So, I assume that these goals and this drive doesn't just come from thin air. So I would love for a little bit of insight onto some of the anime either from the 90s or other animation in general that has really impacted you and your greater mission.
Oh yes, yeah. I grew up I grew up in a great time of movies and animation in the 80s and 90s between Disney animation and like the, Back to the Future, E.T., Indiana Jones. Like I don't know. I mean, I just grew up in this. I love that time period. And at the same time also anime was really like some big titles like Akira. Akira's I always feel like that's one that people always talk about, but like it's just, I don't think any animation has ever outdone Akira yet. To me, that's like the highest quality of in terms of animation execution. I know
Mhm.
Ghibli has made fantastic animation, but it's not it's just the style's a little bit different, but it's also very, very good. But Akira, just like the execution and like the lip sync and the number of like the it was drawn on a lot of ones. It's just so fluid and smooth. It's just like, oh, every time so that's one movie that really like inspired me and like made me. And also too, I love live action film and I like animation, and I always felt like Japan was making animation like a live action film versus something for kids, which Disney was doing more, is more family oriented, and like we've got this four quadrant thing that we got to like satisfy. But there was more auteur vision in the films, in the anime films. So yeah, like Akira obviously is a big one. Ghost in the Shell was big. Ninja Scroll, which actually I just ordered, I have it right here, the Blu-ray, which I guess they don't make anymore. Like you can't stream it anywhere, and so I was like, oh, that sucks. I want this. This is like one of the best titles. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Ninja Scroll. Kawajiri, who's the director of that, and also Jinro is another one by Production IG. I think that's more 90s, but yeah, Jinro, Porco Rosso is that's my favorite Ghibli film. I actually have a Porco Rosso cell right there on my wall. That's from the movie, and above that is a Jungle Book cell. It might be hard to see, but that's a Jungle Book
Oh wow.
cell that's animated by Milt Kahl. So like Milt Kahl is another one of my favorite animators. Like just this fluidity in the animation, it's so subtle and just so well crafted. Um, but yeah, so I'm just a big fan of. I'm trying to think of like Castle Cagliostro is another one that I love. That was like one of Miyazaki's first feature films. He did a lot of TV series before that. But yeah, Castle of Cagliostro was great. I'm trying to think, and all of the Satoshi Kon films too are just like Millennium Actress, Paprika, Perfect Blue. Um, but I think maybe I just love film so much. I tend to be more attracted to the feature films because I want the highest quality. I want like the best of whatever someone has to offer. Like I want to see that on screen. I love seeing movies on a screen. So being able to see Akira and Ghost of the Shell on screen was amazing. But yeah, gosh, I could ramble on. There's so many, but yeah, those are some of my main films that I like.
Japan in general is a pretty conservative society, and I've heard you speak to the industry also kind of reflecting that very conservative mindset. I'm curious if you feel as though there are either movements or studios that are largely contributing to more modern, I don't know if I want to say innovations or advancements or just newer things that are changing the industry.
Well, yeah, one studio that maybe that came to mind first was Science Saru, with da da dan.
Mm.
I'm not sure if I'm not sure you guys, I love that, but I love that anime. Like to me, they're kind of like on the cutting edge of like next generation anime. I mean, there's been in the
Mhm.
industry in general right now, a lot of the key figureheads in the industry have retired or become chairman. So, for example, Production IG, the CEO is Ishikawa-san, and he's now the chairman of IG, and Wada-san, who was the CEO of WIT. So I think like Science Saru, WIT is another studio that when I go there, I feel like it's the younger generation, and they're doing some amazing work. I was on my last trip to Japan. I I kind of recently coincidentally met an animator online, on a social platform, and and we were like, oh hey, let's hang out. Yeah, because I've worked with IG and I've worked with Wit before, so I was invited over to the studio, and like they invited me to their figure drawing class. So I was like figure drawing with the animators from Wit. I was just like, this is awesome. Like, and so it just like that studio has a particular energy that you don't see too much. I think Kamikaze Doga Orange. I also think I'm like I feel like like one of the problems right now in Japan is that there's so much demand for anime right now that to find good animators is really hard. Usually the studios will take them and not let them go anywhere. Sometimes they'll help other studios, but like yeah, they're very, very hard to get, and they're very overworked right now. So, but on the other side, the CG anime studios are not as in demand. They're still doing good work. Some of them not so much, but like there are some studios that are really starting to shine in that area, and I think Orange is one of them. Their work, even when I was looking at it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like just amazing. Like so, like I think people undervalue CG anime. It's just that the CG anime they saw wasn't executed very well, so they're blaming the medium instead of maybe the execution. So but I think the medium is actually quite fine, and actually, yeah, just seeing the stuff on, seeing the work that's being done on Leviathan, I'm like, wow, actually, I think we're starting to reach like 90s level again, like of the anime quality. So I'm like, yeah, I think that for some studios that have the talent and the ability, that it can do really great. So I think like yeah, Orange and Kamikaze Doga are probably the two that stand out to me. But there's others too that are also good. But yeah, I became a little bit more bullish on CG anime after I started working with Orange, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're really good. I was very impressed. So yeah, sorry, I ramble. I love anime, so
No,
I tend to.
absolutely.
No.
I could talk about it for hours.
No, absolutely. That's please. That's why we want you here. That's why we take a bit. I want to hear what you're going to say, and that's why, I give you so much space. But you mentioned Leviathan and some of the things that are happening with that. I would love if we could just take a little bit of time to, hear more from your perspective about that project and what fans should expect and so forth.
Well, yeah, I can't divulge too much information, but we've been working closely with Scott Westerfeld, who's a New York-based author from the very beginning, and also Keith Thompson, who was one of the illustrators of the book. And early on, I wanted to make sure that we were always in close contact with Scott and making sure that we had his blessing, not only his blessing, but just like, are we getting the characters right? Is this, and in some cases, like, it's an adaptation, so it's not going to be the same as the book in some places. So, we wanted to work closely with Scott on those things because we know that fans care deeply about those sorts of things. So we want to just make sure that we did it right and everyone was like, he's feeling good about it. If he's feeling good, then that makes us feel a little bit better. But yeah, Leviathan has been, I think when all is said and done, it's probably going to have taken about 4 years to make. I mean, it was like a very long schedule. But one of the things that's interesting about Orange is that their CEO, his name is Inamoto-san. Yeah, he's a bit of a reclusive character. I've only met him 2 times, but he checks like every single shot. He's giving notes on every single phase of the production. He's like the heart of Orange, and everyone there really looks up to him. And he, Christoph is our director for Leviathan, and he's also been doing a fantastic job. And so credit to Christoph. But in addition to Christoph's work, yeah, like Inamoto's on the execution side, also double checking everything, and so there's so much detail in the work, and it's really evident when you watch the show like how much went into it, and because Inamoto-san and the team at Orange, Christoph has put so much passion into the project, it really translates on the final product. So I just think like, yeah, to me, I think it's probably one of the best Orange projects I've seen, execution and visually. It's a very unique project because it's a Western book. The director is French. It's Orange. It's a Japanese anime crew. The writers from Japan. So and the story itself is about people from different countries coming together, which is so it's like we are kind of living what we're making, which is kind of
Mm,
interesting. It's so unique. I just, it's really stands out as something different. It's not like in the standard, like it was adapted from a manga and people jump
right.
right into it having read the manga. So we're a little bit of an outlier, I think, in that sense. But yeah, I think people when they see the show, they'll really appreciate the quality and everything that went into making. And the backgrounds are just like they hired like they hired a background painting group of people into the company, and so now they like so they're just I mean the quality of the paintings are just really blows my mind. It's like so good. So like and actually I recently watched it on a screen like in a post-production facility, and I got to see it like with all the Atmos sound and like the best projector, and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, this is like feature film quality." Like I feel like you could show this on a theatrical screen and it would look fine. But so yeah, Orange has really blown me away in terms of their quality. So I think yeah, fans if I think fans of Orange will be happy, and I think people that don't necessarily watch anime are probably going to see this and be like, or maybe they read the book and they're like, this looks really interesting. Wow, like this is such an unusual. Scott has such a great imagination and a great like it's just like steam diesel punk, World War One diesel punk plus like bioengineered creatures is like such a wild world to imagine. Like
Mm.
so it's and also his other book came out recently on Netflix called Uglies, which was pretty. I enjoyed watching the show, but again, the more of that great Scott imagination and world building in that show as well. So I think, yeah, I think it's a good world that's suited for anime, and yeah, I just keep having being able to see it, and watching all the shows so far before they've been released. I can say it's looking really good. The quality is like really people will notice it, I think.
That's
I just
awesome.
feel lucky. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to work on this? Like I get to watch like it's like when I see the work coming in and I'm like I get to work on like mechs and things like that, like robots and mechs and flying whales and like what a job. Yeah. So yeah, very it's like yeah, whenever we get my favorite part, one of my favorite parts of the job is when the animators or when they submit their shots or submit their designs, and you just always are inspired by the creativity of the artists. Yeah, it's very kind of keeps me going.
Studio Orange had a really awesome panel presentation also at Anime NYC, where they showed some of the technology that they were using. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that the animators themselves were often some of the actors that they were using behind the scenes for some of the motion that they were doing. And I just
Hmm.
thought that was really interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that they wouldn't have had like either actors or people who were, I don't know, like
Hmm.
for me that world is so different. And I don't know if that stems from my like background as an actor, and I'm a terrible drawer, like absolutely terrible. So in my mind they're like totally separate, but I don't know what's your take on that?
Well, actually in the Western animation world, it's very common for animators to make videos of themselves, and you always see like those
Mm,
side by side videos on Twitter or X now.
uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, like in Orange, they have a big they use motion capture for reference, so they will bring in their own performance into their scene and use it as kind of like photo reference basically, and they animate to that. Sometimes in rare cases they actually use it, but most of the time they just animate everything by hand, but they use it as reference. So that from that perspective, it's yeah, I mean sometimes they will have professional actors that they come in, like people that are experts in like fencing, for example. Or they'll hire
Mm,
it depends on the role and what's going on in the shot. But yeah, they have hired some professional actors, mostly for action-based type of things, but for character-based stuff, because the animators are making the animation, that's not unusual to happen.
interesting. How does how does that work from an IP perspective? I'm just curious. I was recently reading a little bit about choreography and how that fits into IP, and I just learned this that depending on how that choreography is conducted, and if it's unique enough, it's repetitive enough, a dancer could claim that that's their intellectual property. So I'm just curious, given that these are like
Oh,
potentially like martial arts, like if there are forms that are, I don't know, belong to a studio. I don't know. I'm just thinking aloud here, right? Like, has that ever come
oh
up in
yeah.
the production process?
No, not so much. I mean, but yeah, it's true that someone could claim rights on certain performances. It also depends on the local government. Sometimes, like Japan has a is a moral rights country where basically that means that the owner technically always owns the rights and can never sell it to anyone else. So
Mm,
usually the publishers have to always check with the artist, like the manga artist, like Otomo, for example. They have to make sure that he approves. But yeah, like I think typically what happens is like the productions will have an agreement signed. Producers will have a agreement for the performers, which basically they give the rights away, but or that's been negotiated. If they're
mm-hmm,
like, I want a fee for this, usually it is an extra fee for a buyout to buy out the rights from something or somebody. Like writers, for example, typically have a percentage of the production of some sort, but Hollywood never usually does that. So what ends up happening is you just typically pay them more for the service than they would normally get in Japan.
interesting. I wanted to ask before, I know we're going to get to the lightning round here in just a moment, but
Okay.
I wanted to ask one more higher level question. You spoke to committees in Japan.
hmm
I've heard you speak about them before, and I understand that they're responsible for largely financing a particular production. And
hmm
I'm just curious, like, what are those committees typically comprised of? What is their role? Um, and how does that differ in Japan relative to the way production might be financed in the West?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different ways things can be financed, but in the traditional, like for example, for the Hollywood studio model, it's a mega corporation and they can finance their own projects, and usually they want full ownership of the things that they make. So, like Disney, for example, will just finance the whole thing and own everything. It's just sort of like we pay for everything, we own everything. And they have the resources and money to do that. But Japan, because of there's a lot more studios in the industry. They don't have a lot of, they don't take a lot of risks in terms of investing. They're very, very conservative. That's why the budgets have been so low for so long. It's also
Mm,
the reason why anime has been so creative as it has, is because of the not many people talk about this, but because the budgets have been low, you can take more creative risks because, when you're paying for a production, you have to recoup the fine. If I put $100 down, I at least would like to get $100 back so that at least I made something and I didn't lose something. Like there's sort of like, because if I lose money, I can't make more, of the same thing. So there is a business aspect to this. So in Japan, what's interesting is like the methodology is like, well, we don't want to take a lot of risk, but let's all join in together and we'll create a pie of ownership basically. And so like you'll have someone like Toho come in and invest. They get all the theatrical rights for this project. And then you have like Nihon Telebi, who they want all the broadcast rights. So then they own this share of the rights. And then
mm,
maybe there's like Lawson convenience stores and they own all the convenience store rights, or they can sell the product in their store exclusively. So what's interesting about this model is actually you sort of you find partners that are really good at something. This Aniplex maybe has relationship with Crunchyroll or something, and so they can do the foreign sales. So like you basically, instead of having one mega corporation just do everything, Japan will divide and conquer and share the risk among the group. And then you'll have something called a kanji gaisha, who is like the lead company who's put in the most money for the production, and they usually will administer the production committee, and they'll make all the decisions and so forth. But yeah, it is, one of the maybe the things about production committees, I guess, is like, the studios often don't get a lot out of the productions that they make. They're usually just hired to make the anime. And again, it is all about, in business, there's always like risk and, how much, like, risk and reward. So like I'm paying all the money, therefore I should, if it does well, I should be getting the returns on that.
Right.
There is some like standard percentages that they give to writers and directors in a committee, so they do get a little bit. But the creators and all the people, like the 80 or 100 people that worked on a movie or a show, don't really. They're still working under difficult conditions, salary wise.
Right.
So, but yeah, anyway, that's just generally how a committee works. They each sort of are good at the thing that they're investing in, and then they take those rights and then they work together. So that's kind of the big difference between how Hollywood works and how Japan typically works.
Did they ever allow foreign investors, or is it only Japanese companies that can be part of the committee? Because I imagine the companies that license in North America might want to invest into a production to make it
Yes,
better, or I don't know.
some do, yes, but it's very hard to get into. It's very relationship based. It's a little bit like, it's like a golf club. It's like not in a sense of like riches, but just like exclusivity, or just like you
Right.
kind of need to know someone to get the invite. So it's not. It does require someone on the ground there who has those relationships to help build that committee. But yeah, like I have heard of some studios that do, like foreign studios that get involved, but it is really hard because Japan typically doesn't feel. I think they just feel more comfortable working just within Japan domestically. That, that people, there are different there are cultural differences, language differences, there's just like industry differences. So it's really hard. I feel like it has to be a really good project for them to want to do it. Like, like a Star Wars, for example. Like many creators were like, I love Star Wars, let's do it. But that's not, I mean, that was not a committee system thing. That was all just Lucasfilm, but
Right.
and Disney. But yeah, I think like yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that difference.
Very cool. Very insightful, truly.
But yeah, like I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting things happening on the forefront. There are other potential alternate financing, ways, like with technology. Um, there's been controversial things that are really, people dislike, like on the crypto side of things, but
Ah.
I thought Kickstarter is very interesting. Like I had a good experience with that. I think there's something there, but it has to be, yeah, it has to sort of be figured out better, because I think like probably 90%, I'm guessing, I don't know what the percentage rate of failure on a Kickstarter project is, but it's pretty high. So people lose faith, that they're starting to feel the risk because they've failed so much and they've lost a lot of money. But yeah, I think there's like interesting, there could be alternative methods to raise funds for making anime, but it would have to be done very carefully and very making sure it doesn't become like a speculative betting type of thing. I think that's what artists and myself don't really like, this sort of like people with the wrong intentions coming in trying to make lots of money, when it should really just be about the artists and the stuff, and helping artists and supporting their work. Yeah, and AI too has been a hot topic too. Like artists are,
Yeah.
for generative AI, are like very much, it's a hot topic, and yeah, people can get really upset if they don't, if they feel like work is being taken.
Absolutely.
So but I think there are other uses for AI that are helpful, like production pipeline, organizational tasks, like naming shots, or finding characters in a shot that there's a lot that take a lot of time, that's very tedious. Like there's definitely use for it, but definitely though, yeah, certainly we've seen people's strong opinions on generative AI on the internet. But yeah,
We
I
could
don't
talk
do
about
that
that for a whole
personally. But
hour.
yeah,
I'm
yeah, I
sure.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do another. Yeah, we should chat about that another time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fascinating. But I do think there's some interesting things going on in the crypto space, but not
Mhm.
like, I mean, like with blockchain, there are just some interesting things. If done right, I feel like you could create like a nice, I feel like you could create like a fair and balanced like way to create anime, and hopefully, yeah, that will be good for everybody. But yeah, but it have to be done with very carefully.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Cool. Well, I'm going to get to some lightning round questions. I'll let Ali ask the first one, and I'll ask the last one, and we have just a couple here. So a lightning round, just go whatever comes to mind right off the top of the dome. All right.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. My first one was, what is your favorite restaurant in Japan?
Oh gosh. Giardino Savoy. It's my favorite pizza place. And lately, I'm all about pizzas in Japan, pizzas and burgers. But yes, that'd be my first my first thought that comes to mind.
I
Interesting.
love it. It was half a question as also a recommendation of like, okay, what could I maybe add to my
Okay.
list?
Oh, I got a whole bunch. I could name off a whole bunch of places, but yeah, that's
Mm.
the first one that comes to mind. Yeah.
All right. Favorite Star Wars character.
Gosh. Oh no, it's that too big of a question. No. Favorite Star Wars character. Holy moly. Well, you know what? I'm gonna say an odd one, but it has a
Okay.
personal connection. But on the Clone Wars, I rigged Bala Rapal, which is like a I forgot which is like a random character in Clone Wars, but I rigged him, and like I always, for some reason, Bala Rapal always comes to my mind. But like he was he's the Rhodian, I think, the one that looks
Mm,
like Greedo. It's the Greedo species, I think.
yeah.
But there's a Jedi called Bala Rapal that I rigged on the Clone Wars. So I have that's probably the one that comes to mind. If you're asking for the lightning answer,
Yeah.
I have to answer Bala Rapal.
That's a good one.
Random, maybe I don't know if anyone knows that character, but if anyone does out there, you just won a prize.
All right, my next one is what are the most rewarding scenes that you have brought to life? So like in all your projects, what's a scene that
Oh
you've brought to life that you
gosh.
just love?
Um, I in Eden, when Sarah, or when the finale of Eden, when sort of the tragic story of the Dr. Fields is revealed, and he kind of realizes, he remembers who he was. He forgot he was human at one point. So that's
Mm.
probably, I really like that type of a story where someone, might be like, a villain doesn't often know they're the bad guy, and so to
Mm,
remember that they were human once, I thought was kind of, I like that type of a scene. So if I
Mm.
have to answer that one.
very
But
cool.
Star Wars also Visions has like, I could probably name some off there too, but yeah, Eden was the first one that came to mind.
Very cool. Um, what is your favorite anime opening of all time, if you have any?
Oh gosh, I like Keep Hands Off Eizouken. And also
Mm,
actually the Dadan, I love that opening. I just recently saw that, so I'm kind of in love with that opening right now. I mean, I feel like, yeah, and Cowboy Bebop might be another one. That's
it's a
Cowboy Bebop
classic.
opening is like, that's a classic. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. Yeah, like
Hmm.
the music is so good and the visuals, like I might have to say Cowboy Bebop.
Um, now mine is going to be more animation technical. The last lightning round question. What's your favorite animated scene of all time?
Gosh, oh my goodness. Well, one of the one scene that comes to mind. I mean, yeah, I could go ramble on forever, but I'd say like Mind Game, by Masaki Yuasa. There's a scene where they're inside the belly of a whale, and they're just like kind of doing this dance, like to this very well-known song, and they're just like doing cartwheel flips around, and it's like all these multicolors, and they're just like trying to be like, they're in the belly of a whale, like they're just like, they're in despair. They just start swimming and dancing and having fun, and like it's just such a great sequence. Have you guys seen Mind Game? Do you guys
I don't
know that
know. I don't think
movie?
No.
I have.
Okay, all right. Mind Game was directed by Masaki Yuasa and was created by Studio 4C. And another one of the 90s animes that I love. It is truly special film. I don't even know where you can find it nowadays, but yeah, try to find it. It's called Mind Game. You can actually look it up on YouTube, actually. They have that sequence where they're like kind of flipping around rainbow colors. It's like super trippy. I can't words can't describe it. You just gotta watch it. You'll know what I mean, I think, when you see it. Just look up like Mind Game flips or something on YouTube, and I'm sure you'll. It's the song that goes.
Oh, sure.
But I don't know what that. It's a famous song, but unfortunately my knowledge of classical music
I
and
was gonna
isn't
say it's one of those.
strong enough now.
Yeah, fair enough. Is it from the Nutcracker? I don't know, but I know what song you're talking about.
I feel like Warner Brothers has used it before in their,
Yes.
the old Warner Brother cartoons. But anyway, yeah, there's a scene where they animate to that song, and there's like, it's just it is mind blowing, that sequence. So yeah, definitely check it out.
Very cool. Justin, thank you so much. This was such a really interesting conversation, very insightful, and it was an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun. I don't, I'm just stuck in my room making anime all day, so it's nice to take a break and talk about why I do this. And love, I can geek out with other fellow anime fans. So yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And with that, I've been Binge Monster.
And I'm a Green Queen.